All right. So we're talking content. We've already talked a little bit about storytelling and digital footprint. But I want to kind of walk you through by actually showing you a journey. And the journey is my journey, and I think it'll kind of help paint the picture, because I think for so many, we struggle with where do we start? When do we start? What do we have to create? What are our content? And I want to walk you through some of my things, my early journey, and I went back and grabbed some of these, some of this content from the web, and I wanted to share that. And so the first one I want to share with you is actually the very first tweet I ever sent on any account. And so here you'll see here on this account. So this was my very first Twitter account. It was January 14th, 2009. So I actually created an account called Steelers_fans, which was actually my online poker handle. And so that was my very first tweet, and it was mind-blowing, as any of you might imagine. It's working in DC, go Pens. So that was my very first tweet in the Steelers fans account. I tweeted about Pittsburgh sports from another account for a while. And then my very first tweet from my iSocial fans account, which, as you can see, I was really bringing the branding. At the time, it was iSocial_fans, just like my other accounts. And this was my very first tweet from the account that most people know me from now, which was July of 2012. So this is an interesting journey, because for me, lots of people talk about, their journey, or talk about, personal branding, but they do it from a standpoint of like an all or nothing. And, they had books, and I want to walk you through, because this was my first tweet in July of 2012. But I talked about before that, I've always struggled with blogging, and blogs were a struggle for me, and I wanted to kind of actually show you. So this is on Blogger or blogspot.com way back then. And so I had gone to Afghanistan for my job for BAE Systems at the time. Look at that, it even has my phone number in the blog post, which is even funnier. And this is from August of 2009. So I blogged. I had 4 followers on my blogging account. I believe this page still to this day has 10 people have looked at this. This was my journey to Afghanistan. It shows my little bit about me sleeping in my tents in Afghanistan. I might actually have to fire this one back up from memory lane. So I tried this. It just didn't work. So 2009, wasn't a big fan. 2011, this is actually before that, the iSocial fans account. I decided, I'm gonna blog on my own site. I'm gonna create a site about the Steelers, talk about my kids, and this one didn't last very long either, as I think I have 4 posts. On this one, I only had 1 follower of the account. And so this was October 2011. So that wasn't working for me either. August of 2012, I decided, So it didn't work talking about my job. It didn't work talking about Pittsburgh sports. Maybe I'll start blogging about about poker and talking about poker. And actually I got, poker one was an interesting one, because actually it was one of the first times I had ever got paid to blog, and I started to blog for a poker website for a little while. But this was my own attempt to do it here on my own channel in 2012. And as you can see, in 2012, I had some great poker success, not very great blogging success. And, then let's segue into, 2013. And this was actually my very first post on the website medium.com. And I'm going to talk to you about Medium a little bit more in depth. But so I created blogs on my own site, but it just really wasn't working for me. So I started, I decided, I'm going to create a blog in 2013. And this is when I was really dedicated on trying to tell my story. And this was one that, actually talks about my 4 different Twitter accounts that I have and why I created these Twitter accounts. Not a very mind-blowing blog post. It had 3 people that liked it. But this was all the way back in December of 2013. And this is an interesting journey, because, for me, and one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about, and here's a post from my company later on, is that, I failed at blogging, and I kept trying, as you can tell, and I kept failing, which is really interesting. But at the same time, I loved Twitter. I loved social media. I really started, trying to invest into my story. I even started writing a blog for my website, or for my company. So as you can see, this is even a picture of me I believe my friend Vincent Orlick actually took that picture, which is kind of funny. And so this was a blog post that I wrote for my website at the time. But let's look at this from like a standpoint of, okay, so in 2009 I failed at blogging, 2011 I failed at blogging, 2014 I failed at blogging. I started my iSocialFans Twitter account in 2012, but between 2012 and 2014, I participated in a lot of Twitter chats, and I was really trying to find my voice, but also connect with new people, and it was amazing. It was mind-blowing. I remember in the end of 2013, I had 5 or 6 people that really wanted to start a Twitter chat with me and wanted me to help them host, and at the time, there was no video for Twitter chats. It was just a hashtag for an hour. And then Rachel Miller, who I ended up hosting Social Selling Hour with, she came to me and said, there's no chat about social selling. Now, I wasn't a social selling expert. I was working actually in my company to help with social selling. But I decided, I failed at blogging. I failed all these things. I needed to own something. I wanted to be a part of something. So we teamed up May 5th of 2014 to launch Social Selling Hour, which was SS Hour. And for me, this is all a very interesting journey because you might have struggled with blogging. You might struggle with even finding value on Twitter or growing Facebook or which channel you like. And for me, this was one that I kind of dove in, and it's very interesting because the quote's very poignant. This is something that is still very close to us. But Twitter became my home. It became my blog. It started to be where I curated content. And it was really how I was learning to tell my story. And this is a great one. July of 2014, I was actually talking about personal branding, and because I didn't really understand exactly what it was, but I understood what I was doing and I was focusing on. And it's very interesting. This quote is still pretty poignant. Your personal brand isn't a job. It is who you are. Embrace it, promote it as you are your biggest fan, which is way before Think Like a Fan, which is a very interesting time. And this was actually during a Twitter chat as well. And then I had an amazing opportunity. And in 2014, I got awarded the Social Business Leader of the Year. So, I started that Twitter chat, and in September of 2014, I got awarded, this big award, and I'm going to talk about that award a little bit later from The Economist, but this is the one I wanted to show you, is that April of 2014, so this is even before I started the Twitter chat, I had somebody nominate me, Vidar, who was the CEO of Metalit, a great, amazing human being that I owe a lot to, even to this day. He nominated me for an award for the top 25 social business leaders. And this is an interesting piece for me because I didn't have a personal blog. I didn't have a website at the time. I was telling my story via tweets, via sharing content, curating content, being part of Twitter chats. And I guess the main point of this, and really what I wanted to stress on it, is that, finding your voice, finding what works for you, and kind of diving all in, no matter what you've failed at, is something you have to kind of own. And it's very fun because this one, for me, is, this is a Twitter chat this is a nomination that I had before I was creating content. And this nomination allowed me to really changed my path and so much of what I was doing. And I'm very thankful for that. And it included, getting an opportunity to speak at an event on employee advocacy. And this was before, I had a blog. And then even leading to that award that I talked about before. And so as you're kind of going through this path and as you're figuring out all of these different ways to tell your story and embrace content, you kind of have to, kind of go with what works. And I'm going to talk about that a lot. And I reached out to someone, in Daniel Newman, who was the CEO of Millennial CEO, who became my business partner. And this blog post was actually from July of 2014, and it was the first time I had guest blogged on any website. And as you can see, the topic was turn live conferences into digital communities, which is funny because it's a topic I still talk about this to this day. But, blogging about an event I was at, I figured out, I can handle that. But I also loved to consume podcasts at the time, but launching a podcast was too confusing and overwhelming, and I had failed at blogging. But then I got an opportunity to be a guest on a podcast in August of 2014, and then I started realizing that I really love being a guest on podcasts, and I started sharing, what I wanted to do. And this is a very interesting one because this is from August of 2014, and this was my tweet, or this was my soundbite from his podcast, and it was simply, if you want to succeed on social media marketing, you have to show you care. which is very interesting because our next module is the art of showing you care. And so this was something I talked about all the way back in August of 2014. And if you think of it this way, couldn't figure out how to start my own podcast, but I started getting opportunities to be a part of other people's podcasts and be a guest on podcasts. I've now been a guest on over 120 podcasts that are in iTunes today, and it started to be able to find and tell your story. And I think content can come in so many different forms, and it's pretty funny because now I have a podcast that started, Daniel and I launched this podcast called Smack Talk, and if you look all the way down here, we had our first episode in December of 2014. So if you walk all the way through this journey, 2009, I failed at blogging about my travels for work. 2011, I failed at blogging about my Pittsburgh sports. 2012, I failed at blogging about poker. I started to blog on Medium and LinkedIn Publisher. I had a couple blogs on my own personal website. I loved podcasting, couldn't really get into it, started to be a guest. Really owned Twitter and Twitter storytelling, and then I started my own podcast this podcast in December of 2014, which led to a podcast now that I host by myself, which started in 2016. And so I would have loved to launch a show and probably would have failed at launching a podcast back in 2009, 2011, 2012, 2014. But it's all about this journey and figuring out how we kind of work along. And last part I wanted to kind of cover on this is at my journey, and then we'll talk about how I think about starting content, is that, I love video and the power of video. But I'm going to show you a video, and this is the very first video I ever uploaded to my YouTube channel, and it was June 25th, 2014, so not that long ago. But just take a look at this quick little 8 seconds.
Welcome to iSocialFans.com.
Yep, that was it. Which is funny because for me, this is kind of goes into this journey of I wasn't good on video, but part of that Twitter chat that I'm going to talk about later on was that the Twitter chat, we ended up adding a video component to it in the fall of 2014, around just after kind of where this video is shared. And I started to realize that I loved telling other people's story and interviewing people and amplifying others via video and Twitter chats. And I also loved being a guest. And so this is my very first guest spot on any channel, any TV. This is my now a good friend, John Ferrara. And this was at AWS reInvent where I actually had spoken.
Flagship program, we go out to the events, criticism from the noise. I'm John Ferrara, the founder of Silver Name Joe. My co-host Dave Vellante, our next guest, and here to talk about the future of the data center. Brian Fanzo with IO Data Centers. So welcome to the Cube.
Thank you.
So
look at that.
Amazon says we're going to replace the data center. Kind of yesterday they were saying the data center is going to be gone in the future. Okay, small business, maybe law firm, small group, maybe use the cloud, but data center is not going anywhere in the future. This Dave and I were talking about yesterday. So let's talk about the software-defined data center. So talk about IO, your company, and what you guys are doing around here, cloud, and the data center.
So from IO's perspective, the data center is the foundation of any cloud. The cloud has to live somewhere. So at IO we have a global foot.
Yeah, look at that. I full beard going on. I have my IO shirt on. But I guess the whole point of sharing this journey is that you'll hear lots of people talk about failure, talk about it being a long game, talk about it being not good at the beginning and finding your feet and figuring out your way. I'm living proof that now when we go to my website and we go to blogs and we when I Google my name, I have hundreds of podcast interviews. I have thousands of videos via live stream as well as on YouTube. I've probably created a couple hundreds of blog posts, but it's just the idea of starting and being okay failing and starting over and pivoting. And I can remember lots of those times being disappointed in myself for kind of it not being successful, but I don't know if I would have been able to ever get to where I am today. Well, actually, I know this. Let's change that. I know for a fact I would not be where I was at today if I didn't just start and be okay with failing. I hope you'll do the same.